How do you minimize your real estate taxes as a nomad capitalist? That's a question that a viewer named Alexander wrote in and asked. And in this video, I'm going to answer his question and share with you the main tax considerations you need to be aware of. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson. If you want to learn more about how Nomad Capitalist helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs legally go offshore, reduce their taxes, make investments in emerging markets, go to nomadcapitalist.com for more details. And today I want to talk about real estate taxes. Alexander's question that he wrote in with basically asked about income tax. There are a number of other real estate taxes that you do need to consider in different markets, such as property taxes. We've talked about countries with none of those in a separate video, stamp duty, transfer tax, all kinds of different taxes. And what I always tell people is when you're investing in real estate or when you're doing any kind of business offshore, you want to work with someone who has a holistic view of offshore and international tax. Because what you'll oftentimes see is you'll invest in a country where there is one type of tax and you'll be paying tax in a country with a different type of tax, and they won't play nicely together, and you'll end up paying more than if you would have just invested domestically. So you don't want your country's taxes to be fighting each other. Keep that in mind. If you're interested in talking about other types of taxes for real estate, leave a comment below and we'll consider doing that. But let's talk about income tax. There are two main factors here. The first factor is who you are. The second factor is where you're investing. For who you are, there are two camps. As always, repeat after me: Americans and non-Americans. And for where you invest, of course, that is relatively self-explanatory. Let's first cover a common misconception. If you are a U.S. citizen and you, let's say, leave the country, or even you renounce your citizenship, or you're a citizen of any other country and you simply leave the country and you are no longer paying tax there, if you still have real estate investments or potentially other type of investments in that country, that investment may be subject to tax. So, for example, I've had several folks come to me recently who are from Australia. They run big businesses. They're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in tax. They want to get out. But they've debated keeping their home, renting it out, and maybe they want to move back in the distant future. The challenge with this is now you're still in the Australian paperwork system. You're potentially still paying some tax, and this is the case in any country, not just Australia generally. And so it becomes kind of a burden. It's maybe not a big financial burden. The tax may be low. You may be worth paying the money, but it's another thing to think about. And I can tell you, after all the years of doing this, you want fewer things to think about when you're becoming a nomad capitalist. And so understand that, as myself, someone who expatriated from the United States, if I go and invest in real estate in the United States, I'm still liable for tax. Okay? The fact that I don't live there and don't pay tax there does not mean I get a free pass when I'm buying assets in the country. Okay? So it's not like a business that can float in the cloud. Real estate assets are, of course, tethered to the ground. So you want to keep that in mind. For me, a lot of times, it's not just about the actual tax. I don't mind paying some tax. I like paying low tax, but I don't mind paying a little something. What I really hate is paperwork and risk and all of that. And so I think that keeping all those things in mind is important when it comes to potentially detaching yourself from real estate investments in your own country if you're leaving that country. Now, let's come down to other places that you might invest. We've talked about markets such as those in the Gulf where they have 0% income tax. Countries like Georgia, where if you structure the right investments in the right way, you can pay 5% residential rental income tax. There are other countries that have pretty low tax rates. Some of the Eastern European countries have 10 or 15% tax rates. Other countries have exemptions where they reduce tax rates into single digits. Other countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, have thresholds where if you don't earn more than that amount in tax, you don't earn in income, you don't pay any tax. And so it could be $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. One or two properties might only generate that much. This is all good as long as you are not a U.S. taxpayer. Okay? So let's say that you're anybody but an American and you leave your home country for tax purposes and you go and set up shop somewhere that's tax friendly. You're living in a zero tax country, a territorial tax country, a lump sum tax country, a non-dom situation, anything like that where your tax is either zero, your foreign source income's not taxed, or you're taxed a flat amount that doesn't increase based on what you're actually making. in that situation, you can go out and enjoy the fruits of these low tax countries. And so it's a good idea to go out and find the places with 0, 5, 10% tax rates, or again, depending on how big your investment is, some kind of exemption. I personally stay away from the larger markets, the US, the UK, Australia, in addition to estate tax issues sometimes. Again, there's just a lot of paperwork. They don't make it easy. They're not as friendly to your capital. I think those markets are oftentimes overpriced, and their growth potential has been played out versus a market that's emerging. And so I'm looking for those low tax rates, or I'm looking for exemptions. If I'm an American, I can't fully avail myself of that because in the United States, citizens and any other taxpayers, green card holders, pay tax on their worldwide income. Now, if you're running a business, you can minimize your tax through the foreign earned income exclusion, use of offshore companies. When it comes to passive investments like real estate, there aren't as many options unless you're a professional real estate investor and you can claim that you're actually doing it full time or close to full time. You're just going to pay. Now, in the United States, there is a standard deduction. It's $12,000 right now. If you're married, you can double that up. And so there is some kind of relief for smaller investments, as long as you don't have other U.S. source income tying up that standard deduction. But do understand, the foreign earned income exclusion for Americans is earned. Passive income earned through just passive real estate investments does not count. So if you take my example of Georgia, 5%, if your income tax rate on that income, would have been in the 22% bracket, for example, then you're going to take a credit for the 5% you paid in Georgia. You'll pay the other 17%. So it almost disincentivizes investing in low tax markets if you're an American. Now, some of these low tax markets are just good investments anyway, and you just pay the U.S. tax, and at least you're making more than you would have on a similar investment in Wichita, for example. But some of those low tax markets have higher property taxes, or they have stamp duty, or they have transfer taxes, and those taxes can't always be deducted. Again, this is why you have to have a holistic plan, because you don't want two different things butting heads and causing your tax bill to actually go up. And so for U.S. citizens, the lowest tax countries aren't always the best. Again, if you look at a market like the UAE, very tax friendly, but you're going to pay a transfer tax. Right? You're going to pay the real estate agent. On the buy side, you're going to pay the real estate agent. So you're paying, I think it's 5 or 6% you're probably going to pay. Doesn't match up with the U.S. system, so there's not really a way to get that money back. And so for everyone who's not an American or who wants to become a former American, then you go out and you seek the lowest tax country for investment, and you live in a tax-friendly place. Okay? Remember, if you go and move, let's say you live in Canada and you want to get out of the Canadian tax system, if you go and live in Germany, for example, they also have high taxes, and they're also going to tax you on your worldwide income, right? So if you just go and live in most European Union countries, unless you're getting some kind of lump sum tax or some kind of non-dom tax program, you're just going to pay the same amount you would anyway. And again, you're generally going to get a credit, or there's going to be a treaty, or you're going to be able to take write-offs. There's many different ways you can do it depending on where you live. But you really want to be living in a tax-friendly country, and if you're an American, you can't do that because this passive income isn't excluded. There are ways for Americans to do it, but for a lot of investors, it's just not going to make sense. For most investors, I would say. Okay, so those are the things that you want to keep in mind. If you're an American, make sure you're not going to be paying extra on other non-income taxes that the IRS won't let you deduct because they don't have the equivalent tax. And then from there, just make sure that you're not finding markets that have higher income taxes than what you would pay in the United States. Maybe you don't go to Spain, for example. I don't know why you're investing in Spain anyway, but as long as the tax isn't higher, you'll be covered on the U.S. side because you're going to pay them anyway, subject to that first standard deduction. You can get a little bit of relief with that. For everyone else, really the issue is your personal tax home, where you're personally paying tax. If you're Canadian and you live in Canada, you're going to pay. But if you're Canadian and you move to Dubai, then Dubai's not going to care what you do. And there are many other countries like that as well. And then it's just a matter of going out and finding the best low-tax real estate investments. Now, obviously, if the returns are double and the taxes are a little bit higher, it's not all about the tax, it's about the returns. But one thing I found is in emerging markets, sometimes the markets with lower taxes, those are the places where people are coming in and they're investing, and so therefore prices are being driven up. You're getting growth. Your yields may be squeezed over time, but you're going to be able to sell that property in the future for growth. I mean, that's why Hong Kong and Singapore are two of the most expensive places on earth. They're not only small, but they're very open and free economies with low taxes. And so sometimes you have to consider yield and you have to consider the future capital gain. That's another issue where if you're an American, you're going to get stuck on the capital gain. If you're not an American and you have a good tax-friendly base, that's going to be better. So you want to consider both factors. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, your questions. I want to hear from you. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.